Good deal. So my name's Chris Peterson. This is the input maintenance class. We're talking about inputting listings in Paragon this morning. A couple of things. First, you got two handouts there. One's about Instinet, one's about the MLS and the rules and entering listings. Make sure everyone's clear, this isn't the rules class. This isn't the class you have to take. This is the class you have to take to input listings. There's another class that the board's making everybody take by the end of the year. If you've already done it, good for you. If you haven't, there's 2 months left. It's going to be fun for the rest of us when people are slow at getting it done. If you know someone that has to take the rules class or you haven't done it yet, just for your information, you don't have to take a class. There's an online thing you can do that's like a 20-question quiz that counts the same. So you don't have to come to a class. What? On the front page, well, it goes out on the bulletin. It's been out on emails, but right here on the front page it says IMLS rules training and test. They can go there to do it. So, yeah.
Well, I've actually taken this class before, so if I can do that, and you'll see you guys later.
Well, if you've already done the input class, yeah, you don't have to take the input class again.
This class.
The input class, not the rules. This isn't the rules. This is input.
Okay.
So yeah, if you've already done input, and then you don't have to take it again. Nope. So, if you've done input, you're good. So the first thing to talk about is the thin handout, which is Instinet. Now you might be thinking, isn't Instinet going away? It is, but they're going to have it for about a year. So they're still going to have it for a while. The reason Instinet is important is if you don't use Instinet, then you're going to be entering things twice. Because if you're required to fill out a data form by your broker, which a lot of offices require that, then you're also going to have to re-enter that same information into Paragon. That's why when the whole forms thing was happening, you got a bunch of pop-ups when you logged in, because the MLS board of directors thought it was important for all the members and brokers to know what was going away if they didn't extend Instinet for a little while before this new program was integrated the same way. So whether or not you're using Instinet or your office is moving to Form Simplicity, that doesn't matter. If you want to be able to save time with Paragon, you want to use Instinet right now. So that's what we're going to talk about first. So the thin handout you've got has two things Instinet can do in relation to Paragon. First, you can import information from a data form. Into a data form, I should say. So if you're taking a listing and it was sold in the last 14 years, expired or canceled in the last 6 years, or active or pending, you can import it from Paragon into the data form without having to re-enter all the data. So you can save time that way. And then you can take that data form and send it to Paragon. So to import it into Instinet, let me get a data form up here. So I'm just going to the forms, IMLS data forms, creating a new residential data form. So, and our data forms are in Form Simplicity, so you can fill them out there. But what Instinet has the ability to do, that Form Simplicity will have the ability in the future, is under File, is Import Listing. So go to Import Listing, put in the MLS number. And this is the first thing on your handout there. 8528. So put in that MLS number, click on the check mark, and then it's going to pull in 80% of that listing information into the data form for me. So that way I don't have to enter it all myself. There you go. So now you'll see it's got the information in here for this property. Now, of course, if you're the listing agent, you've got to make sure it's correct. You can't just assume the other agent did it right. You got to make sure it's verified. But this will save you tons of time. So you don't have to go in and re-enter it yourself. Now, when you are in Paragon, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, but when you're creating a listing and you want to partially save a listing, you will notice that there are 4 fields here. Once it decides to load for me, there we go. 4 fields that have this green square with the white P. Type, area, and then all the way at the bottom, listing date and expiration date. Those are required to save a partial listing. And again, we'll talk more about partial listings in a minute. But in Instinet, if I'm going to send this to Paragon, what it does is it sends it as a partial listing. So those same 4 fields have to be there. And I will show you when you pull it in from a previous listing, it does not put in the owner name or the dates. Because, of course, those correspond to your listing agreement, not the listing agreement that listing came from.
Thank you.
And so when you're importing it from a listing into Instinet, you're still going to have to go put that information in there. Because if I click on Upload Listing up here on the right, which is the second page of your handout, sending it from Instinet to Paragon, If I click on upload listing and I don't have those dates, then it's going to come up here and tell me expiration date is required, list date is required. Now those dates don't have to be the exact dates because it's not a real live listing yet, it's a partial listing. So you can always go in and change them, but you still have to have them in there. So let's say I'm not firm on my dates yet, so I'm just going to kind of ballpark it. Let's say I put in today is the listing date, and let's do November 30th is the expiration date. Now when I click on upload listing, it will come back and give me a message that it's been uploaded. It says this listing was successfully uploaded. And if I go here into Paragon, and I go to the partial listings, then that property on, what was it, Alaska, will be there as a partial listing. So here in Instanet, it gave me that 217589 as my partial listing number. That partial listing number has no bearing on the MLS number. But if I go here to maintain partials under the listings menu, and I search for that, I'm searching for it because I have a lot of them in here, but if you just had one, there's that partial listing right there, and now I could go in, maintain the partial, and finish filling it out so that I'm able to save it as a real listing. So I've just basically almost inputted an entire listing, and it took me less than 5 minutes. Again, that's why the MLS didn't want to just drop Instanet in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Can you show me how you upload your new data?
So when you're in Instanet, when you're on the data form, right up here at the top, it says upload listing. Yep. And it uploads it as a partial listing. And again, a partial listing is not live. It's only available to you and your broker. This is something that Instanet's done for about a year, which is why when Form Simplicity told us they could do it in 30 days, we knew that was not true because it took Instanet about a year to get this figured out. So if you're in a hurry to leave Instanet, feel free to type things in twice. I will tell you, brokers hated that. Duplicate entry was something that people didn't want to have to do. And so right now, the only way to avoid that is Instanet. So questions about importing it from Paragon, exporting it to Instanet. Does that make sense? And again, your little thin handout here, the first page talks about how to import the listing. The second page talks about how to export to Paragon and view it as a partial listing. All those same things I just did right on that handout. The last thing about a partial listing I'll mention, I'll probably say it again, is that when you put a partial listing into Paragon, whether you use Instanet or you save a listing as a partial, it can stay there for up to 6 months. And it's not live, days on market don't start because it's not a real listing. So it's just there for you and your broker. Let's go back here to Paragon. And so now we're going to talk about if you were entering a listing and you were not using Instanet. So to go in and enter a listing, well, before I even start with that, now if you look at your thick handout, the one that's like 15 pages, 20 pages long, or whatever, first page is an application. If you are an agent, not an admin or a personal assistant, but an agent, you fill this out, your broker signs it. Once you've had this class and this is returned signed by your broker, then your security level is upgraded so you can input and maintain your own listings. If you change offices, you don't have to take the class again, but you'll have to fill out a new form signed by the new broker to allow you to enter listings. If you ever need a copy of this form, if you go here to membership info, right here is agent input security form. So you can just get a blank copy right there. There's a fax number at the top. My email address is at the bottom. Either way, you can return it. But again, it's got to be signed by your broker. After the page that has the application, then you'll see some pages with a bunch of screenshots that says inputting a listing in Paragon. And even though we just looked at how to do it with Instanet, we're still going to go through the process of entering it manually just in case you ever do that or you're maintaining a lot of information. That's going to be the same thing. You'll notice we're not in the computer lab, obviously, because there's more of you here than we fit in there. But the other reason we're not in here is that unless you have input ability turned on, you can't go to the input screens. So it's not like it's a hands-on class. I mean, we don't have a fake database, and I don't want to have to delete a bunch of listings that people put in because they didn't know what they were doing. So that's why you don't do it first. You take the class first. Just like driver's training. You go in the classroom, and then you get in the car. So you got screenshots on here. So when you're entering and maintaining your listings, you can reflect back on what we've talked about and remember what we did. After the screenshots about inputting and maintaining, on what is page 11, supposedly, let me make sure, yep, page 11, you will see some pages that have no screenshots that says residential data input form instructions. We're going to talk about a residential listing this morning, and that's it. Residential has by far the most required fields. If you understand how residential works, all the other ones are the same. They just require different things. I mean, farm and ranch requires information about number of acres irrigated, how many animals per acre. Well, a residential listing doesn't require that because you can't have cows at your house. So we're going to talk about residential today, but if you work with those other kind of properties, if you understand what a required field is, then whether it's talking about animals or acreage or number of bedrooms, it's the same thing, a required field. So the first thing we're going to look at here is to go in and enter your listing. Once your input security level has been upgraded, then under the listings menu, you will see add listings. If you don't have add listings now, it's because you don't have that ability turned on. And once it's turned on and you're entering a listing this way, the first thing you have to decide with your listing is what property class it fits into. If it fits into more than one property class, it can be listed more than once. So if we've got a property that's a farm, but it's in an area that's being developed, it can be listed as farm and ranch, business commercial, vacant land, all at the same time, which means I would have 3 MLS numbers for one property. When it goes pending, I can mark all 3 of those as pending, but when it sells, I would choose which one to mark as sold and cancel the others because it didn't sell 3 times. So that way you're able to get in front of as many agents, as many people as you want, but you just have to make sure that it follows the information in the MLS. And one of the rules the MLS has is you have the next business day after you begin marketing to either enter it into the MLS or turn in the waiver of benefits. So that applies to all 3 of those in my little example. So if I've got it in as farm and ranch and a month later with my seller, we decide to put it as vacant land and business commercial, Paragon's going to let me do that, but those second listings will have been entered in 30 days later, not by the next business day. So I would get a $100 lag time fine for each of those. So the way to avoid the fine would either be to cancel the original listing, get a new listing agreement, and enter it all 3 ways, or get an addendum signed by the seller that you're putting it in a new property class. There has to be documentation for what you're doing with your listing. Just like a price change or a status change, you have to have documentation. So you can put it in more than one class, but it's got to match the rules. So you have to have that ability in there. So we're going to pick residential here. Well, before we pick residential, like I already mentioned, it is waiver of benefits. So if you're not going to put it in the MLS by the next business day after you begin marketing it, then they want you to use the waiver of benefits. The waiver of benefits is also here under membership info. I think it's also the very last page of your handout. It used to be. Is mine open here? Is that coming up? Yeah, the waiver of benefits is the last page there. So the waiver of benefits is the exception to the rule. When a broker joins the MLS, they say all my listings are going to go in the MLS. The waiver of benefits is the exception to that, whether it's an exception for a few weeks or the entire duration of the listing. So if your listing is not going to go in the MLS, the other option is the waiver of benefits. There's no other third choice unless you're not marketing it. And not marketing it means not mentioning it at office meetings, doing nothing. So no sign, nothing. If you're not marketing it, time hasn't started ticking. If you're marketing it, it's either got to go in the MLS or you have the waiver. With the waiver of benefits, there's a place for you to fill it out. Your seller initials and signs it. Listing date and expiration date on the waiver correspond to the listing date and expiration date on your seller rep agreement. If you're just withholding it for a short amount of time, maybe you're doing it coming soon for a couple weeks, then future date for MLS input would be when you're putting it into the MLS. By using that future date for MLS input, that date is the one you would use as your listing date in Paragon. So for example, let's say I took a listing today on October 28th. My expiration date's April 30th. My future date for MLS input is November 15th. So instead of putting October 28th in Paragon when I put it in there November 15th becomes my listing date because I put that in as my future date for MLS input. So if you're withholding it for a little bit of time, that future date for MLS input allows you to not have it reflect those previous days. And there's an email address, fax number to send in that waiver of benefits. And right now the waiver of benefits is the only way to do a coming soon or an office exclusive. In the future, there'll probably be a different way to do coming soons, but right now there's not. And if you see a listing that has a sign in the yard or there's marketing for it and you haven't found it in the MLS, on the dashboard here is this listing waiver search. And you can click here, and then you can search by address or agent. I'm going to put 63 in there and see what we find. So here's some properties that have 63 in the address. And then you would, if you had a buyer interested in one of these properties, you'd contact the listing agent and go that way. People have asked, is there any way to search these with more detail, with square footage or anything? Nope, because these agents don't want their listings in the MLS, so they don't have that ability. So if the office exclusives, coming soons, have waivers, you can just come here, search by address or agent to pull that information out. Yeah.
So when you send in the waiver of benefits, MLS puts that
Right.
in, okay.
Yep, MLS puts that in there. If the future date for MLS input changes, just call us and they can update it. Like these ones that don't have future dates, that just means they're office exclusives. So, and we're not going to know if they've sold unless somebody tells us. So, I mean, this one that was listed back in May, it could have sold or expired, but until someone tells us, we don't know. I mean, because we don't go in and change that stuff without the agent telling us. So that's where you'd find those listings that have waivers. Questions about the waiver of benefits? Does that make sense? Last thing about the waivers is a few months ago, the board stiffened the penalty for not using it. If you do not use a waiver, the first fine is $500. The second fine is $750. The third fine is $1,000. So they really want you to use the waiver. It's either got to go in the MLS or go on the waiver. I had somebody get mad when say, well, it's America. I can do what I want. You totally can. Don't join the MLS. Because the MLS is a private company, just like the YMCA, just like Netflix. You can't share your Netflix password with everyone in the world. They'll cancel your membership. Sorry to tell you, that's how it works. MLS is the same way. So, you know, I understand the frustration. People want to do what they want. That's totally great. But you can't be a real estate agent in Idaho and sell a lot of homes if you don't have a license. The state doesn't let you do that either. You know, same thing with stealing cars. If I sell 20 cars in a year, I'm going to have to make some changes in my life because I'm not a private citizen anymore. I'm a car dealer. So Paragon MLS works the same way. Yeah.
So when you go in and check for those listings and they're not there, which seems to be common.
If you can't find it in Paragon and you can't find it in the list of properties that have waivers, let us know and we'll contact the agent. I mean, I know of 2 situations where people already got fined $500. So I mean, and I won't say the board wants to make examples of people, but the board wants people to I mean, again, the market's great right now, so people think that people get really frustrated. But when the market sucked, it was important to know what was going on with everything. People are in a hurry now. They get busy. They don't think things matter. But to the board, time is slow. The board has a long memory. The MLS has a long memory. Agents don't always have a long memory, and so that's why they want to have that. And I'm not saying the first time if you forgot you would be fined, but I don't know the scenarios of the people that got fined already, but you know, there's a reason. It's either one or the other. If you don't want to, again, there are brokers that aren't part of the MLS. You can be a non-member and join the MLS. You don't have to be a member of a real estate association to join the MLS. There's lots of ways you can avoid this, but you wouldn't be using Paragon and you wouldn't have the services of the MLS because you're not part of it. So anyway. All right. Any other questions about the waiver benefits? Okay. And I'm not trying to make it sound scary. I just am trying to tell you the rules. I mean, I figure if I tell you all about the rules and how bad the fines are, you won't have be an issue with that. I mean, so. All right, so back here to the listings menu. We already looked at how to use Instinet, but we'll pretend we didn't use that, and I'm entering it manually. So I'm going to go here to under the listings menu, and under add listing, choose my property class. So I'm going to pick residential, since that's what we're going to talk about this morning. And before we jump in and talk about the required fields here, across the top is this blue toolbar, just like when you're in Paragon searching or looking at listings. On the left is save, and the 2 choices are save listing and save as partial listing. Save as partial listing, we already talked about. Partially saving a listing lets you save your work before it's a live listing. So you could go in 2 months ahead of time if you knew you were going to get a listing, or a week ahead of time, or a day ahead of time, whatever you needed. You could go in early, enter the listing data, partially save it, and then make it live when it needs to be live. And we'll look at the partials, saving partials later on, but you can upload photos and documents. So even though the MLS rule is the next business day, the rule is that you have to start inputting the next bit by the next business day. It just has to be in there. You could be inputting it a week ahead of time. So you've got plenty of time to do what you need to in there. And then save listing, of course, saves it, submits it, makes it available to everybody. If you've got all the required fields and they're entered correctly, when you hit save, it's live. There's no clearinghouse, no waiting period, no, oh, I hope it's all right, I hope I got everything. It's live. So you want to make sure that when you save it, that you're ready for it to be that way. And one thing about saving that I'll say is, if you put the wrong price in when you save it, at the MLS, we can correct the original price so that when they look at the listing, like bring up a listing here, like here's the price, here's a field that says original price. We can change the original price to make it match the price that you changed it to if you entered it wrong. But in the history, it's still going to be there. And there's no way to change the history. I mean, the history is one of those fields that is unchangeable so that the database has integrity. I mean, so when you're entering a listing, if you enter something incorrect like the price, we can fix it. We just can't take it out of the history. So I'm telling you that because everyone makes mistakes, but if you're aware of it and you double check your information, then you have less of those because we can't take it out of the history. So that's save, partial save. We'll look at both of those. Tax autofill. So here's the counties we have tax data on. You can use the tax autofill to pull in information from a property and put it into the MLS. Now, don't get excited. It doesn't pull very much information in. Idaho has 44 counties. There's 44 ways to format that data. We can't tell each county how to do it. The state doesn't do that. And so for most counties, you're going to get part of the address and the parcel number. With Ada County, you get a little bit more, but it's going to vary by county. So just to show you how it would work, since we're in Ada County, I'll click Ada County here. It's going to bring up the tax search. You search for the property that you're entering into the MLS. Since I'm looking for one property, I put the same address in the minimum and maximum. Type in the street name, and you will notice that one listing matches my criteria. So that's the one I'm looking for. So I hit search, click on the address, and then here's autofill. Now it's going to bring us some information that's going to try to autofill, and it will do everything except for the city. So if you think about when you do a search in Paragon by city, you don't do city, comma, state, space, zip code. All you type in is the name of the city. And since it's going to try to put all that information in there, it won't accept it. So when I hit save, even though that's checked, city is not there. But there's the address, there's the zip code, there's the number of acres and year built. And if we come down here to financial, there is the parcel number. Now the parcel number is important because the parcel number is what links the tax data. So that little T that you see on listings on the full detail, that automatically gets added when the parcel number is correct. So if you're looking at a property, specifically a Canyon County property that doesn't have the tax icon, it's because the parcel number is not right. And with Canyon County properties, the county provides two numbers, a parcel number and an account number. Some title companies call those parcel 1 and parcel 2. One title company calls the account number the parcel number. All I'll say is if you put it into Paragon and the tax icon's not there, the parcel number's wrong. So you got to make sure you put the right one. Yeah.
Just a quick question. If we put in some of this information already,
Uh-huh.
oh, I want to use the tax autofill, will it override what I have?
Yes. Yep. So if you have information in there and the tax autofill will just put in the tax information on those fields. Yep. It'll automatically do that. So that's tax autofill. Reset fields will let you clear out information and start again. Required only shows all the fields that have the red square with the white R. Display all shows all of them. There are some that are required, excuse me, that don't have that R. An example of that. So here's irrigation district. If I mark that as a yes, then irrigation district name is required. And if it's a required field, TBD is not an answer. I had someone say, well, how am I supposed to know the irrigation district name? How did you know it was in an irrigation district? Probably because they have a tax bill or a irrigation bill from the irrigation district. Like irrigation district wouldn't be City of Nampa, that's just a utility bill. Irrigation district would be the Nampa Meridian Irrigation District, where you're paying the district separately from your city utilities. So if they're in an irrigation district, mark yes, you have to put that in there. And that goes really for all the required fields. If it's a required field, you have to put it in there. Parcel number we talked about with the tax autofill. If you have a large parcel like a field, a farm that's being subdivided to be developed, if you are entering those individual lots and you don't have the new parcel numbers yet, they all have the parcel number of the large lot because that's the parcel number today. So you just want to make sure, I mean, TBD would not work. And with a lot of these fields, I know I talked about the fine for not putting it in. The MLS has fines if you don't enter certain things, but if you fix it, you're not fined. Like if you put TBD in there instead of the parcel number and you got notified, hey, parcel number is a required field, you need to put that in there or you could be fined, and you put the parcel number in there, you're not going to be fined. The MLS, we're not trying to make money off these fines. They're there as deterrents. And if you've taken the MLS rules class, you've heard me say this in there, the data in the MLS isn't for the internet or for your consumers or even for your seller. It's for the other agents and brokers. That's what the MLS exists for. 30 years ago, the books that are out in the garage over there, that's why they have the data they have. Paragon is just the books, but it's got a lot more information. So the MLS requires it because the brokers, when they join, want to be able to share their listings with all the other brokers so that they can sell them quickly. I mean, if we didn't want to do that, you can just go knock doors until you find your own buyers, because that's what it was like before the MLSs existed. So you got to make sure if it's required, you put it in there. Open all and close all. These little containers, close all is easier to show you first. Close all closes them. Open all opens them all. When you come in to work on a listing or maintain a listing, the general section is the only one that's open. So questions about the toolbars at the top? Okay. So to get here again, I went to listings, we picked residential. So now we're going to start talking about some of these required fields. And the first one after you get to the input screen is status. And when you're entering information, just like when you're searching, you can either type it in and click on the choice you want, or you can click on the magnifying glass and pick the choice you want. It's up to you. I'm going to click on the magnifying glass a lot just because it makes it easier to talk about it. But I'll tell you, if I was really entering a listing, I probably would just type it in because I probably already have a data form that I already filled out. So I want to be as fast as possible. So when you're entering a listing in the MLS, your choices are new or back on market. The difference between those is new means it's at a new office, or it's been 30 days or longer and it's being relisted at the same office. That's new. Back on market would be that it's being relisted at the same office and it's been less than 30 days. Both of those change to active after 3 days. So you want to make sure you're entering it appropriately. Contingent means you have an offer, but you're still looking for other offers and you still want to make it active and it's still going to be on the internet for other people to see. If you're not accepting offers and you don't want to make it available, then you mark it as pending. As far as the specific contingent statuses, the MLS doesn't really define those. It's up to you to choose which contingent you want to pick. And your bump clause to make someone be able to be the primary offer needs to be in the agent remarks. So contingent means it's still active, it's still available, you're still looking for offers, where pending means you are not. Sold and unpublished sold, that's pretty easy. Listings that were in the MLS go pending and then are marked as sold. An unpublished sold would be one that was never in the MLS. They had a waiver of benefits, it was an office exclusive, and now that it's sold, for tracking or for comps, they want to put it in the MLS. So that would be unpublished sold. And then pending lease purchase, that's pretty easy. It's all a listing that has an offer, you're not accepting other offers, and then rented and leased means they're rented or leased. So you want to pick the appropriate status. We're going to pick new here for ours. Now there's one status that you wouldn't see, well, a couple statuses that you wouldn't see until after your listing is active. One of those is canceled, which means your listing agreement is canceled because Paragon is an online representation of your listing documents. So like when your listing gets an offer that's accepted, you put it as pending in the MLS. If the listing gets canceled, then you change the status to canceled in the MLS. The other status to talk about is temporarily off market. So again, temporarily off market, you wouldn't see until your listing is already in the MLS. But temporarily off market is a status that allows you to pause the listing for your seller. Because a temporarily off market listing won't be transmitted to the internet, and it's against the MLS rules for anyone to show or allow that property to be shown. Temporarily off market just means it's not available. And then in order for someone to show it, you have to transfer it to an active status to be able to have that happen. So we're going to put new here. And as we go through this, if you have questions, feel free to ask them. So after status, the next one here is type. Type kind of starts at the top of page 12, in case you're wondering where we're at on the handout. Or actually, I guess the middle of page 12. So we already talked about being able to be in more than one property class. I'm already in residential, though, so I can't be in residential more than once. So here are the property types. Single family and single family with acreage are the most common types that are used. And they have a shared definition. And I'll just read the shared part of it here. Single family would be a stick-site manufactured modular built home on a foundation. So basically, if it's on a foundation, it's single family or single family with acreage. The difference between those two is single family is less than 1 acre. Single family with acreage is 1 acre or more. And Paragon has programming on the back end that if it says single family with acreage and the number of acres is less than 1, it won't accept it. So you have to make sure they match. And if your seller, your seller might have 0.85 acres and they want it to be single family with acreage, but it can't be that because it doesn't have 1 acre. If they don't like the MLS rule, get them a dictionary. If you don't have an acre, you can't have an acreage. That's the way those words work. It's how English is. They come together. So it's got to be 1 acre or more. Townhouse and condo are the next ones that are used most often. Condo's not going to have lot ownership. It's going to have a unit number in the legal description. And a townhouse would have lot ownership and a lot and block number in the legal description. Manufactured, owned lot, rented lot. These are ones that are not on foundations. So you can just pump up the tires, drag them away. And then recreational land with home is the most vague of all these. It just means the land the home is on has recreational value. So maybe it borders Forest Service land or BLM land. It's on the river. It's on the lake. The trick is it can't be in residential twice. So if you pick recreational land with home, then you're saying the recreational part is more important than the single family part. I had an agent ask about, what about a home in McCall? Would that be recreational land with home? What do people do in that house? Do they get up every day and go to work? Do their kids go to school? Because that's probably single family. I mean, you just have to use your best judgment. There's a reason that option is really vague because there's a lot of possibilities there. But it can't be both, so you got to make sure you pick the appropriate one. So we're going to pick single family here. Price is pretty easy. County's pretty easy. Then we get to area. So area, you want to make sure it's in the correct area. It's a required field. On the dashboard here, over under other services and tools, it says area maps. So I can click there, and it brings up this area maps page. IMLS find an area. You want to click on that link. And then it brings up a Google map where you can put in the address of your property and find out what area it's in. So I'm going to put in the address here, 2872 South Pine Flats. And you have to put in the city and state or it will think you are in California. All right, so put in the address and I can see that this one is clearly in area 1000. Now, in the Treasure Valley here in Ada County, Canyon County, we've got lots of areas and cities. Some areas have some cities have 3 areas, some cities have 5 areas or more. As you get to the more rural, less populated areas, you're either going to have 1 area per city like Twin Falls, or you've got multiple cities per area like Kimberly, Hanson, and Murtaugh. 3 different cities, they're in 1 area. So for those locations, it's pretty easy. If the area name has your city name in it, that's the area. For the ones that are in the Treasure Valley, there's actual lines on the map that you have to adhere to. So you want to make sure that it's in the correct area, and sometimes area and city don't match. So here we are on Eagle Road. I'll give you an example of that. So we're heading north here on Eagle Road. There's the village. And then here is Eagle and Chinden. There's a subdivision right here at the corner of Eagle and Chinden called Bristol Heights. Bristol Heights is clearly in area 1020. But if you live in Bristol Heights, you get your mail to a Boise address. So it's Boise is the city, Meridian 1020 is the area. So you got to make sure they match. Now, should that be a Boise area? Maybe. The board of directors are the only people who can change that. Or they're the only ones that can say area is not required anymore. Until they do something like that, you've got to make sure it's in the correct area and the right city. And you can definitely, we'll listen to you complain about it. Totally will listen to that. I can't make a change. I do not have the responsibility to make those changes. So you got to make sure it's correct. And I'll just give you another example, not to pick on Bristol Heights. So if we head north here, you'll notice area 900 is green, area 800 is purple, and anything east of Highway 55 would be in area 800. So you might have an Eagle address, but you're not in area 900. So you just got to make sure it's in the right area with the correct city. And I had someone say, well, that's going to make it hard for people to find those homes. It's really not, because that's how the MLS areas are divided. Well, consumers don't know that. That's true. So if they search by the city of Eagle, they would find houses that are here. But if they search by area 900, they wouldn't. Consumers don't know what the areas are until agents tell them. Area 100 is not the north end. It goes all the way to Boise County. People don't know they want to live in area 100. They want to live in the north end. So area, in my opinion, is less important than it used to be because we have Google Maps and the mapping option in Paragon or the Zillow app or whatever Realtor.com app they're using. They're not searching by area anymore. But agents do, and that's not a bad thing, but you just need to remember that area and city don't always match. So back here to our example, area 1000, so back here Paragon, put in area 1000. And I will tell you from what I understand with the board, the reason it's taken them so long to figure out what to do is there's people on the board that just want to get rid of area altogether, which I kind of lean that way because we don't really need it anymore. It was great back before you had GPS on your phone. I mean, back when you just had a book and you had to know where those areas were because you couldn't pull them up on your map on your computer instantly. The other people want to change the areas. So the board, the 18 members of the board all have to agree on what they want to do. They got a lot of other stuff they have to do as well, so area just doesn't ever get dealt with. Anyway, so you got to put the right area in there. Subdivision, if you start typing in the name of the subdivision, it will come up for you. If you want to bring up the whole list, you can click on the little magnifying glass. There's 5,295 subdivisions on that list. So if you don't find it and call to have us add it, we definitely will do that, but we're going to verify it's not on there because there's a good chance that one of us might have missed it. You know, it's 5,000 subdivisions. And if it's a phase or something, we're not going to have that in there. Columbia Village is one subdivision. And if there's a different marketed name than legal name, we're going to have the marketed name. We have Woodbridge in here, not Snorting Bull, which is the legal name of Woodbridge. There's another one in Meridian called Autumn Fair. The legal name of Autumn Fair is Trisha's Sub. I mean, consumers aren't going to know what those legal descriptions are. There's one, not just to pick on Ada County, there's one in Nampa called South Fork Ranch. The legal name is Midland Park. So, I mean, we want those marketed names because that subdivision list goes to websites. When consumers are searching and they want to search by a subdivision, they're not going to know to put in Snorting Bull. In fact, I guarantee you that there are probably people in Woodbridge that may not remember that Snorting Bull is the legal description of their subdivision. So if it's not in a subdivision, there's 0 not applicable. You can select that. If you're not sure, one way to check, if you don't have the legal description, which you probably would have, but you can always see other properties in the subdivision, what's been used. I mean, maybe there's a name that's very similar that all the other listings have used. That would be the one to use. You just want to make sure you have the right subdivision for your listing. So 1000 Spring in there. City, like I said, the autofill didn't put that in there. And then after zip code, these aren't required fields, but they're important fields. They're the 4 fields that determine what this listing is going to do on the internet. So the first one is internet include. And what that means is, will this listing be included in any IDX syndication feeds that the broker sets up for their office? So if you don't want to go into any other website but Paragon, because obviously it's going to be in Paragon, you can change that to no, and it grays out the other choices because it means it'll only be on Paragon and won't go to other websites. Internet address display means when it's on those other websites, can the address be displayed? If you don't display your address, Zillow doesn't know where your house is because that's how it finds your house. So just keep that in mind if you choose to not display the address. Display comments and display AVM. Both of these deal with listings that are on websites where a consumer logs into an agent or broker website. So display comments means when a consumer logs into your website or your broker's website or some other agent's website, can they leave comments between them and the broker or them and the agent about this property? So I like this property, when can we go see it? It's available next week or whatever. If you mark that as no, they can't leave comments. Display AVM. AVM stands for Automated Valuation Model. It's like a CMA. If you mark that as no, then websites that create CMAs or an analysis can't use your listing. So for example, Listing Book has one called Cyber CMA. If you mark that as no, they can't use that as a comp in their Cyber CMA.
So on Zillow, if you scroll down, it usually says the estimate. So will
Does
it
estimate? Yep.
Will it not say the Z estimate then?
If you mark that as no, Zillow won't display your listing.
Okay. If you mark display AVM no,
They won't display your listing. Because even though your broker might be sending listings to Zillow, Zillow still gets to choose what listings they display, and they want to display listings that are going to help them calculate estimates. So if you mark that as no, your listing won't be this. And if you mark it as no, it can't go to Cloud CMA either, because Cloud CMA is a third-party tool that creates analysis. So, so you can definitely mark those however you want. If you forget what they mean, over on the right, these little question marks that you see occasionally give you definitions. I'll give you one example of where marking internet include as no made sense to me. Only one example I've heard of. In McCall, the actor Val Kilmer owned a house or a cabin up there. He sold it through an agent. They put it in the MLS. They didn't want it going to other websites. They marked it as no. Now, unless your client is name recognition of Val Kilmer, I would say no one that's an elected official in the state of Idaho, Butch doesn't even reach that. I mean, Butch Otter, go to some other place, say Butch Otter, they're like, what are you talking about? The zoo's over there. Otters are over there. Not making fun of the governor. I'm just saying he doesn't have the name recognition of other people. So if your regular Bob and Jan seller are listing their home, marking this as no would be more detrimental than leaving it as yes. Because if you mark it as no, it's only in Paragon, so 5,000 people will see the listing. If you mark it as yes, it goes to whatever website the broker is sending listings to, so potentially hundreds of thousands of people will see it. So sometimes people will tell me, well, my clients are concerned about privacy. All that goes to those websites is what's on the MLS client detail. So none of their contact information goes there. Parcel number doesn't go there. If they're in Ada County, not to scare them, even though this is Halloween season. If they want to see what's out there, have them go to adacounty.assessor.org and look up their house. There's a lot more information there than we send it to Zillow or any other website. So the reason I bring that up is if you mark these as no and then change your mind, it takes longer to populate out an existing listing than it does new listings. Because Zillow looks for new listings like every 20 minutes. It looks for updated listings once an hour. And I know may not sound like a big difference, but other websites are slower than that looking for updated information. So you just want to remember, if you're marking these as no, it won't go to websites. Now, as far as what websites they go to, I already mentioned it. The broker chooses that. We had someone come in and complain about Zillow, and I'm not saying Zillow is the best. They're not my favorite website, but the broker is the one who chooses if listings go there. The MLS doesn't. The broker doesn't want the listings to go to Zillow, they don't go. But it's all or nothing for all the sites. You can't The broker can't say this listing goes, this listing doesn't. It's they all go to Zillow or they all go to Realtor.com or wherever it's going, or none of them go. And the brokers, like I said, go in and choose that. When you're using the data form, which is why I left Internet open here, up here at the top, it says Internet check if no. If you mark these check boxes and then you upload it into the MLS, it will mark those as no. Because like it says, check if no. That's what it's telling you. So those are the internet fields. Questions about those? Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, you can always go and change them. The downside is it'll take longer to populate out on the internet. So yeah, you can always change it because sometimes people don't see what they are and mark them as no, or didn't know what they were. Because lots of times we'll get phone calls. People will say, "I can't find my listing on such and such website." And if you look at the listing in Paragon, it's not on the MLS full detail because there's not enough room. But if you go to the report that's called All Fields Detail, which shows every single field, right up here at the top, Internet include, display comments, Internet address display, display AVM. So if you were to look at a listing and those said no, then that would be why it might not be out at different websites. So I had someone in a cloud CMA class wanting to do a flyer for their own listing and they couldn't pull it up, and it's because those had been marked as no. So you just want to be aware of what's on the listing. After the internet fields is type of ownership. There's two choices here: fee simple and less than fee simple. Fee simple is pretty easy. It means there's no restrictions or exclusions. I mean, that's a very simple answer, but it means there's no problems, no complications. Less than fee simple means there are complications. There are restrictions and exclusions. I think a house in McCall around the lake, they have state land leases. So those would be less than fee simple because you can own the structure but not the land. And so you just want to make sure you're picking the appropriate one. One here in the valley that would be less than fee simple. There are some over 55 communities that have foundation stick-built homes that the owners own, but they pay a lease on the land every month. That's less than fee simple. I mean, someone sees a 3,000 square foot house for $180,000. There's a good, I mean, not always, but especially if it's in an over 55 community, it's probably less than fee simple because they're paying, $500 a month for the rental of the land. So, and I had someone say, well, why would they do that? Not in this exact scenario, but my grandmother, when she used to live in a subdivision that was that way, because they took care of the property. I mean, they maintained the whole thing. I mean, there's reasons people do that, but that's the type of ownership. Validate map is the next one here. Now in your handout, it talks about validate map and listing maintenance, and so we'll talk about it again there. But what validate map lets you do is, while you're entering a listing, make sure the map is in the right place. So you click on it, it brings up change geocode, which is what it'll talk about in our maintenance part in a little bit. So here it shows where Bing Maps thinks the address is, and we already saw it on Google Maps, so we know it's in the right place. But if it was in the incorrect spot, you can click on that icon and move it. The other thing you can do is you can move your map wherever you need it to be. So let's say, for example, there's a new subdivision right here off of Overland and Stoddard that because it's so new, Bing Maps doesn't have it on here. You can click on the little push pin, click where your property would be, and then when someone brings it up in Paragon and clicks on the map icon, that's what they'll see. Or when they do a mapping search, it would come up in the right place. And if you've ever clicked on a listing and on the map icon and it said no map available, it's because the listing agent hasn't gone in and done this. And if the person is the listing agent or co-agent, they don't even have to take a class. This is something they're able to go in and maintain on their own. They can go in and fix that. And then once you click save, then whatever you've put in there for the map is what it's going to use. Garage capacity wants to know how many cars fit in the garage. If you listen here, I'm going to bang on my keyboard. All it takes is a number. So you can't put 3+. There's what's a plus. It's either a 3-car garage or it's a 4-car garage. There's not a in between there. That's why it's not garage size. It's garage capacity. What's a half car? And so you need to put in appropriate information in there. The MLS doesn't have measurements, so we're talking common sense, not Mini Coopers, the new Fiats or a Hummer. We're talking about, minivans, a sedan, how many regular cars fit in the garage. I had someone in class yesterday say they had a seller that said they had a 9-car garage and they wanted to know how the MLS would take that. I said, well, if you put it as a 9-car garage, don't be surprised if some potential buyer says, can I see 9 cars going in and out of that garage, please? Because that's what they want to see. I mean, and this particular seller said he could get 9 cars in there. I don't think that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a regular person who's not a trick driver. How many cars can they get in there? It doesn't mean how many bays. There's plenty of 3-car garages that, because of the way the lot is, are 3 cars deep and it's 1 bay. That's also a fun thing to watch happen, but those really exist. You know, the 9-car garage, I'm skeptical about. Anyway, you want to put that in there. I've had people say, well, what if, it's an oversized 3-car garage? I want to be able to say that. That's what the remarks are for. This is specifically asking garage capacity. And if there's not a garage, because it's required, you got to put 0. You can't leave it blank. Below that is carport capacity, so if it has a carport, you can put that in there. Land size, age, and level have preset ranges to pick from, so you pick the appropriate one. Land size has to match number of acres, and I'm going to make mine give me an error, so we'll see that in a minute. Age, you pick the age range. Age also has to match year built. So 2001, 6 to 10 years, no matter how great you think 2001 was, it wasn't 6 to 10 years ago. So I'm going to get an error on that. And then level lets you choose the level of the property. Below grade means a basement. So if it's got a basement or it's split entry, you just pick the one that's best matching your property. Directions lets you type in the directions of the property, which is approximately 2 3/4 lines, capital W's. It's 100 characters. Like texting in Twitter, it counts your spaces. So you want to make sure you're clear and concise. We just looked at putting in the map in the correct place. If you had to put that in the correct place and the roads weren't on the map, this might be the only way they find your property. So you want to make sure it's easy to read. If you're listing a property in Nampa, you don't have to give directions on how to get there from Boise. You want to give directions from the city the property's in. It's clear and concise. And you can even be doing it the right way. There's a subdivision off of Eagle Road called Candlestick Park. Is that right? Yeah, and it's got all baseball stadium names, or at least what they used to be before they all got corporate sponsors. Anyway, those have long stadium names. And even with 100 characters, we had an agent in here entering listings, and it was left from Eagle Road into, or west from off Eagle Road into subdivision, and he had to abbreviate the names because they were so long. It was 100, and the reason it's 100 characters is by being small like that, it makes it really easy to go to the super app, on all the mobile apps, the mobile website, because it's only 100 characters. Makes it easy to include it. Number of acres, we talked about that. The tax autofill puts that in there. Year built. Lot size, length, and width. If it's irregular, it'll take IRR. If it's not irregular, they want the frontage width and the shortest length for depth. Irregular means like a cul-de-sac or a triangle or a circle. If it's just an irregular rectangle that's not 90 degrees, it's not an irregular lot. Like if the lot is 120 by 78 by 100 by 85, that's not irregular, that's a regular lot. And that's a lot, you put the dimensions in there. And an easy way to get the dimensions, especially for most lots here in the Treasure Valley, a lot of title companies have the plat maps online. Pull up the plat map, the measurements are on there, enter it in. It's really, I mean, of course you can measure it too if you want, but that makes it easy to get.
You say you put in the narrowest?
Right, the frontage width and the shortest length for depth. So, and the reason it's important is if you have a potential buyer that has certain lot length requirements for a trailer or a mobile motorhome, that's the word I'm looking for, a motorhome, or whatever they might have, they need to know how big things are. And by not putting them in there, you make it harder for people to find your property quicker. I mean, because if they have a large item they need to put in there and you put it irregular and they drive by there and it's not, then you just frustrated somebody that you could have had just bypass your property. And so you just want to make sure it's correct. But it will take irregular if it is irregular. I will tell you there's agents that, there's 5,000 agents in the MLS, so a lot of them sometimes have time on their hands. There's agents that love to nitpick lot size. Before we had the correction button on listings, people have to print out the listing reports and bring them in. There was an agent, he brought in one like a stack, like a 1/4 inch high of listings he had problems with, and a lot of them were irregular lots. That was his pet peeve. He would drive by irregular lots that said irregular in the MLS, and if it's in the middle of the subdivision and it's not on a corner or in a cul-de-sac, it's not going to be irregular. You just need to put the measurements in there. So, and it happens all the time. You're going to see plenty of them that do it. And it's one of those things. If you got a notice about incorrect information, if you didn't fix it, it'd be a $100 fine. So you have it incorrect. If you have it correct, then no one can turn it in. Irrigation district, yes, no. We talked about that. Then we get to the school and the school district. And because school district is linked to area and city, when you go to your choices, you're only going to see ones that apply to those choices. So if you live in Meridian, you're either going to go to West Ada or CUNA School District. Nampa and Boise, those aren't in there. So you pick the appropriate district and pick your appropriate schools. The schools that are on the list should be ones that are geographically assigned. So you just pick the ones that apply. And as long as it's correct when you enter the listing, that's all that matters. I know West Ada is in the process of rezoning schools, or they take effect next year or whatever. You want to put in what's correct now. And then if it changes and you want to fix it, you can do that. But we just want the correct information now. After the schools, the next required fields are square footage. And it's the first of a few that are called calculated fields. If you look on page 15, you can read it. And if you like reading paragraphs about math, feel free to read about calculated fields. I don't like reading about math. So I'll explain it. Calculated fields are pretty simple. You'll notice there's no field that says total square feet. The total square feet is calculated and put on the listing automatically. But what you're entering is the parts, and then it's added on. So let's say I've got 1,700 above grade, 1,000 below grade, no unfinished. So then my listing would say 2,700 square feet. So it totals it up automatically. Bedrooms and bathrooms work the same way. After the square footage, then you've got room sizes and levels. Room sizes for any rooms are not required. If you want to put them in, it's just number X number. Bedroom levels are required. There's not an R next to it, though, because until you go in and put how many bedrooms there are, it doesn't know how many levels to require. And with your level choices, main is the main level, down is below that, upper is above it. So you just pick the appropriate one. And then after the bedroom levels, the other room sizes and levels aren't required. The only thing to watch for is don't call one room two things. So for example, you'll notice this one says den size and den level right there. There's also office size and office level. Both of those could be defined as rooms with built-in storage, with shelves and things. And if you marked it on here in both of those options, even though you're trying to say it could be a den or an office, there's no context. And so someone else could see that as meaning there's a den and an office. So in the remarks, where you can write a sentence about it, you could do that. Perfect den or office with built-in storage. But here, you've got to commit to what you want to call it. And the MLS doesn't define those. I mean, here's living room, great room, family room. If you ask 10 people about a room in a house, you could probably get that answer more than once from all those 10 people. So, you know, the MLS doesn't say what a great room is or what a living room is. It's between you and your seller, but you just can't call it two things. After the room levels and sizes, then we get to the bedrooms and bathrooms, like square footage. It's broken down. So I've got main level, upper level, and below grade. So let's say I've got 3 bedrooms on the main level, no upper level, 2 below grade, 2.5 baths on the main level, no upper level, 1 below grade. So I'd have 5 bedrooms, 3.5 baths. And for the MLS, it's either a full bath or a half bath. There's no 3/4 baths, and which means a toilet and a sink, half bath. Anything more than that's going to be a full bath. It won't let you put more than one number to the right of the decimal, which is Paragon's way of telling you that 0.75 won't work. And that's the last part of the general section here. Questions about entering that information? Okay. So after the general section, then we've got features. Features are the second and third page of the data form. So if you want a list of them, that's where you can get your list, second and third page of the data form. And with features, there's only a few that are required. Construction, list class, and source of square feet. And if I click on the magnifying glass here on all features, it brings up a checklist. So if I hit required only, all you have to enter are those particular ones. So this is where if you had a mobile home or a manufactured home, you'd specify that, even if it's on a foundation. So let's say I've got frame construction with stucco, it's exclusive right to sell, and we got the source of square feet from public records. Once those are in there and you hit save, that's all you need to put in there. That's all the MLS requires. Now that being said, there are a lot of other things you would probably want to include to be able to have people find your property easier. And so with features, you want to make sure you're picking things that exist. Like central air doesn't mean they can go to Home Depot, buy an air conditioner, hook it up to the house, and now they have air conditioning. Central air means they go to the property, knock down the thermostat, and the AC turns on. It means it exists. Under the kitchen features, they even call it included kitchen features, so it's specific enough. If you pick dishwasher, doesn't mean there's a hole in the cabinetry where you can install a dishwasher. It means there's a dishwasher there. And so you just want to make sure that when you're picking features, that they're things that exist. Like we get down here, a lot of features, garden space follows the same line of thinking. Garden space means there's either a place they have a garden or a weed patch that used to be a garden, but not that they can dig up the grass and make their own garden. I mean, that's obvious. Garden space means a garden is there, which gets me to my favorite one to talk about, RV parking. Because RV parking meets the same qualification as those others, meaning there's either a place created for parking an RV or a place where they are parking their RV. That would be RV parking. So it could be a gravel pad, a cement pad, could be an RV garage, could be pavers on the grass they've been driving on. It also could be if they have a large backyard and a gate that opens up to the road and they've been parking it on the grass, that's also RV parking because that's what they've been using it for. If they haven't been parking it on the grass, even though they got that big gate, it's not RV parking. You can put in the remarks, large backyard, gate opens up to the road, park your toys here or whatever, but you can't call it RV parking if they haven't been using it for that. Just like the garden space. Yeah.
Well, then if you've got a 5-acre field, say, there's all kinds of room in
Huh?
your house. You can't call it RV parking if they don't own one?
Well, no, they don't have to own it, but it either has to be a place where they've been parking one or a place created for it. Just like a garden space. I mean, if they've got 5 acres of grass, you can't call that garden space. They have to have, so RV parking meets the same criteria. So, I mean, would it be hard to go buy 12 pavers or 20 pavers from Home Depot and put them on the side of your house? That wouldn't be hard to do, and then that would work. But I mean, it's just, I mean, it's got to fit in that scenario. So, and as far as the other ones, I mean, obviously they just have to make sense, common sense. I mean, horses obviously doesn't mean you get horses when you buy this house. It means if you have this house, horses are allowed here. You know, chickens is on here somewhere too. It's the same thing. You don't get chickens. It means they're available to have. So you want to make sure you're picking the appropriate things. And as long as the required ones are filled in, you can save your listing and come back any other time and add these in. So, and a couple other ones to talk about here. View, there's no definition of view. It's between you and your seller to call it a view. Same thing with waterfront. And in the Mountain Central MLS and McCall, they have like 12 or 13 waterfront definitions. We have 1. So all 13 of their definitions fit into our 1, which means obviously waterfront is more than just on the river or on the lake. There's more things to waterfront than that.
On the canal.
Well, yeah, that could work if the canal has water in it all year. I mean, there's plenty of places that 30 years ago they were called ditches, and now they're called creeks, and there's walking paths, and it's all landscape. If water's in it all year, you could call that waterfront. I mean, the Greenbelt in Meridian and Nampa doesn't have the Boise River next to it like it does in Boise, and people call those waterfront. They've landscaped down. They've got fire pits down by the water, little docks they've built. They fish in it because it's not an irrigation canal that only has water in it 6 months out of the year or whatever. It's got water in it all year. So until the board decides to get more specific, which I don't think they ever will, because how are you going to get 18 people to agree? It's just going to be very vague. And so when you're listing a property, that works in your favor. When you're working with a buyer, that's frustrating. But the MLS has to play both sides. So, you know, waterfront is what it is. And the thing I would say, if you pick one of these that you select for your listing, if someone has a question about it, just make sure you can explain why you picked it. Like we had someone that picked tennis courts, which I think is up here higher. Or I missed it somewhere. Oh, here's tennis court right by waterfront. So they picked tennis court. And the tennis court obviously is not on the property because I got to tell you, there's going to be few and far between if you have a tennis court in your lot. And the tennis court wasn't in the subdivision, but this property was right across the street from a park or a school or something that had tennis courts. So tennis courts are right there. I mean, that's why they picked it. There's another one that says like city bus. Does that mean the city bus pulls into your driveway? No, it means it goes by your house. It goes near where you are. So you just have to use common sense, and if you see a property that doesn't fit what you think, just remember there might be other ways to view that. And if your listing is the one that somebody questions, be able to explain why you picked it. I mean, they're vague for a reason, but it doesn't mean everything's always going to count. So you want to make sure you pick the things that are applicable. Last one to talk about under structure features, just because people ask about these all the time. Here's where you've got separate living quarters, which would be mother-in-law quarters. But separate living quarters is the PC word to use that NAR wants you to use because I got to tell you, if you're not married, you don't have a mother-in-law. That's how it works. So mother-in-law quarters don't apply if you're not married. Just separate living quarters applies to everybody. So you just want to make sure you're picking the right ones that are there. Questions about the features? There's like a million of them. You just got to make sure that they apply. So After the features, the next section here is financial. It's a short section, but almost everything is a required field here. And this is at the bottom of page 16, starting with homeowners association information. Association fees, association frequency, setup and transfer fee, setup and transfer fee type. If you have HOA fees, you'd put them in there. If you don't, you've got 0, not applicable, and 0 you can put in there. But if they exist, you'd want to put them in there. The transfer fee type by default is a dollar amount, but you can pick a percentage if that's what it is. Local improvement district is a yes/no field. It wants to know if the home is in a local improvement district, which would be a temporary taxing district for that location, typically for upgrades to that location. If a subdivision is annexed into the city, they might be put into a local improvement district to help recover some of the costs for connecting to civic services and repaving the road and building sidewalks. The thing with local improvement districts is they're temporary. They go away after so many years. An example of one that's already ended, over in Nampa by the Idaho Center, Kensington and Lyonsdale subdivisions were in the North Nampa Improvement District. And they had a higher tax rate for like 8 years or whatever than properties a mile away because the city was recouping costs from the infrastructure that they put in. And so the reason the local improvement district question is here is if the home's in a local improvement district and you mark it as yes, that helps a potential buyer understand the taxes will go down. They're at a higher rate for a certain reason, and they'll go down. If it's not in one, then of course you mark it as no. Homeowner exemption, same thing. If the tax amount information, the tax information does not reflect the homeowner exemption, mark it as no. The yes/no field is if the taxes reflect that the tax amount is with the homeowner's exemption or not. Because if you don't have that exemption, your taxes could be a lot higher than the house right next door that does have an exemption. So it's just to help explain that. Flood insurance, yes, no. You need to have flood insurance there. If you go to FEMA.gov, they have the floodplain maps there. But I know I've been told by some agents that homes that are in the map on the floodplain can be built in a way so they are out of the floodplain. A lot of homes in Eagle are this way. And there's some kind of certification process to go through. I don't know anything about that. But I would imagine if your seller has done that or the house they own is that way, they'll be waving that like a white flag because it's going to make that house cheaper to own because they won't have to have flood insurance. And then you have taxes and tax year. You'll notice the tax autofill didn't put that in there. So whatever the tax amount is and then whatever year it's from. Legal description, you have 255 characters, so you should be able to fit the legal description in there without any problem. If it's too long, put the most descriptive part in there, and you can always upload a document with the full legal in it as an associated document later on. And the parcel number, we talked about that. And then the last ones are the distressed property fields. Short sale, bank owned, foreclosure, auction, HUD. They are just yes, no fields. Just fill them out. And if something changes, maybe it's not a short sale when it starts, but it's a short sale later, you can always come and change it. So that's the financial part. Any questions about those at all? And then next, we've got 2 sections left here on inputting. The remarks, you've got the public remarks and the agent remarks. And the first thing to talk about is over on the right, this little check mark and a square is spell check. Use spell check. You want to have some fun, look at how many agents don't use spell check. The thing with spell check that's important is if you have misspellings on your listings, then potential buyers might wonder if you can't spell correctly, what else have you left off? What else have you neglected to look at on your listing? And so that may not be a fair leap to make, but using correct spelling keeps that from happening. So spell check is right there. The remarks, the public remarks are the remarks that go out to consumers. They go on all the client views. They go to other office websites. So it's really restrictive. All that can go there are things that describe the property. If what you're putting in there could be seen as doing something other than describing the property, you don't want it to go there. I mean, just a perfect example how the same words could mean 2 different things. If I work at CBH Homes and I put in the remarks, CBH Homes Alaska plan, the floor plan for your life, blah, 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 that's a violation. Because yes, CBH Homes is the builder. They're also the office. If I work at Keller Williams and I put CBH Homes Alaska plan, blah, 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 that's not a violation because I put in the name of the builder and the name of the floor plan. Exact same words, but because of who the listing office is, one's a violation and one's not. So you want to make sure that when you look at the remarks and you're entering information, make sure you're entering things that you would want to see come up on your website on somebody else's listing. That's the whole point of making it sanitized, is that it can go to anybody's website and can be viewed. So no contact information, office information, any of that. Now the agent remarks, because it's only seen by agents, you got a lot more flexibility. All your contact information, office information, showing instructions, homeowner information, security codes, that can all go in the agent remarks. The only thing that can't go in the agent remarks is unrelated third-party marketing. So in the agent remarks, I can't put Pioneer Title is the best, but I could put seller prefers Pioneer Title because now I've connected it to the transaction. So you just want to make sure that when you're entering information, that you're entering it appropriately. And that also applies to the items in the associated documents. You can't just upload random documents in the associated documents. They have to be related to the transaction or to the seller or something like that. So questions about the remarks or agent remarks? All right, last section here then is the agent section. So when you're entering a listing, you are the primary agent. You cannot enter the listing as the co-agent. You enter it as the primary agent. You can choose the co-agent, and co-agents can maintain it, but you can't enter it as the co-agent. To add a co-agent in here, you would just come here, type in the name, select the person, and put them in there. And then after the co-agent, the next one is selling agent to present yes, no, just so you know where we're at. We are on page 18, right in the middle. This means selling agent to present offers directly to the seller. So Idaho minimum standards means you're going to mark no on this. Now, the reason it's yes, no field is because we also have agents in Oregon that have different standards. And so you're going to mark it as no if you're an agent in Idaho because you're going to have the offers brought to you. Variable rate, yes, no. Wants to know if you have a variable rate commission. Bottom of page 18, it talks about that. The third sentence is the definition of variable rate, so I'll just read it here. It says, this is when the seller agrees to pay a specified commission if the property is sold by the listing broker without assistance, and a different commission if the sale results through the efforts of a cooperating broker. The listing broker, and this is the last sentence, the listing broker, in response to inquiries from potential cooperating brokers, must disclose the differential. So variable rate commission means that the total commission changes depending on where the buyer comes from. So if I'm the listing agent and I'm going to offer 3% to someone else and I get 3% in that scenario, the total commission is 6%. But if I double end it and the total commission is 4%, that's variable rate commission. From the beginning, that's my relationship with the seller, that if I double end it, it's 2% less than if we work with somebody else. And that last sentence says you have to share the differential if they ask you. That means someone else can be make a competitive offer because they come to me and say, hey, I see you've got a variable rate. What's the split? What's the difference? And I would say 2%. So they would make an offer that's 2% higher to make up for the 2% savings that the sellers would get by going with me. So if your commission is 6% or whatever it is, no matter what, you're not changing it, then you don't have a variable rate commission. Variable rate means you're changing it if you double end it from a total amount like 6% to 4% or whatever it might be. So here you're just marking yes or no. Does that make sense what variable rate is? Okay. And then in the MLS, you just have to identify if you have it. It's up to the other agent to notice that and to ask you. You don't have to wear a hat and a T-shirt that says I have variable rate commission. You just have to wait for them to ask you. Co-op broker compensation and compensation type. What are you offering somebody else? There's the numeric value. Here is the kind of compensation. That's $3. That's 3%. So the MLS doesn't have any minimums. Technically, Paragon won't let you do less than one, so I guess $1 might be the minimum. But here you're identifying what someone else is going to be compensated. You don't have to put in what you're getting. So this is the buying, the selling side of the transaction. Listing service lets you choose the listing service your office is providing. Full service means your office is doing everything. You're presenting the offer, negotiating it, working on counter offers. Limited service means you're not doing all those things. Maybe you're presenting the offer, but they're negotiating it with their attorney. MLS entry only means all you're doing is put it in the MLS. Someone else is doing the rest of the transaction. And depending on the business model of the office, you might see all three of these. Full service is by far the most common. But the reason it's here is if you had a limited service listing and an agent had a buyer, they would know that on the other side of the transaction is not a full service office, so they may not be doing all the same things that the selling agent's doing for their buyer. So you're putting that in there depending on the service you're providing. Most are going to be full service. Owner name and tenant and contact information, none of that is required. But if your owner or tenant are involved in setting up showings, of course, you'd want to put that in there. Listing date and expiration date, we talked about that being required for partial listings. And even though you can't see anybody else's expiration date, everyone has to put them in there because it's required. So you put in your listing date and your expiration date. And as long as it hasn't expired, you can come back and extend it. The way listings expire, though, is on midnight of the expiration date, the listings are pulled off the MLS for 24 hours, so you can't search for them, and it gives you a 24-hour grace period to extend your listing. So in this example here, I put May 31st as my expiration date. So on midnight, May 31st, it would be pulled off the MLS, and all June 1st, all day June 1st, would be that 24-hour grace period. So if I got a signed extension at 11:30 p.m. on May 31st, I don't have to rush home to Paragon in a half hour before my listing expires. I've got all day June 1st, and as soon as I put in that extension, it's active again when I save it. If I didn't get the extension, then on midnight of June 1st, it goes back on the MLS as expired. The expiration date is still hidden, but if somebody pulled up that all fields detail, the off-market date would be the expiration date. And expired listings are dead and gone. You can't resurrect an expired listing. So if your seller decides 3 days later to relist with you, you've got a new listing agreement, you've got a new MLS number, and you've got a new listing. Now, we just looked at how to use Instinet to pull listing data in. When we look at listing maintenance, there's a copy clone feature that if you're at the same office where you had the listing before, you can use copy clone, and it copies everything over, including the pictures, except for the status and the dates. So if your listing expired and a week later your seller wants to put it back in, it's not a big deal unless you're at a new office. Then you have to use Instinet to do it. But it's not hard to recreate the listing. Occupied by, owner, tenant, vacant. Pick the appropriate one. If they move out, of course, you can change it. And then showing instructions, lockbox, call for instructions, drive-by, whatever it is. Pick the appropriate thing. The virtual tour fields, there's 3 branded and 3 unbranded fields. A branded virtual tour has agent and office information on it. An unbranded tour does not. So if you put it in the unbranded field, it's not going to have any agent or office marketing information. Just the virtual tour.
Will you just copy and paste the link?
Yep, just copy and paste the link in there. Yep. And if you have a virtual tour company that you're using, a lot of times they'll push those in there automatically to Paragon.
So why is there branded virtual tour 1, 2, 3?
There's just 3 of each. 3 branded, 3 unbranded. If you only have 1, you'd want to put them in the 1 field. So that's entering the information. Questions about any of the fields we've talked about so far this morning? Okay, so let's talk about saving. So let's say I wanted to partially save. I go here to save as partial listing. And as long as I have those 4 fields, type, area, and the dates, and screenshots of this, I think are on page 3. If I go to save as partial listing, yep, right at the top there. Then I click on it, and if I've got those 3 dates, this comes up. If this message does not come up, it'll tell you you're missing something. You'll get a little error down at the bottom. To partially save it, I can hit continue input if I want to keep working on it, or if I need to leave Paragon, I can hit finish, and then I can go back to that maintain partials and pull it up later. So I want to keep working here, I'm going to hit continue input. This lets you save your work as you go. Because Paragon's the internet, and if you've ever, on your computer where you normally work, if you've ever had to hit refresh to reload a page, or you click on a link to load a video and it didn't load and you had to click on the link again, those same things are going to interrupt Paragon too. And so if you're partially saving as you go and something happens, you at least have up to that point so you don't have to start again. Now, after I partially saved it, you'll notice I can come over here and I can upload the photos. I can see a preview of the listing detail. I can upload documents, all while it's a partial listing before it's live. So you don't have to be in a rush to get all the information in there. And then once I've got everything in here, and I want to save it, I go up here to save listing. Now, of course, I don't have everything in here. I'm missing some things. So if you go to save listing and you get the errors to come up here, it hasn't saved it yet. You've got to make sure those are all corrected before it saves it for you. So some errors, like these first ones here that have this accept button, doesn't mean it's wrong. It just wants you to verify. It says, is the listing date correct? Is the expiration date correct? If they're correct, if I don't remember them, I can go to modify. But if those are correct, when I check those boxes and save it again, it won't bug me about those anymore. Here, this one says the list price is outside of normal range. It's because I put $1,000 for the asking price. But if that's what I want, I can click accept. And then when I go to save the listing, it won't bother me about that anymore. Now, the rest of these are things I'm missing. Like I don't have my bedroom levels on there. Or like we talked about before, if age equals 6 to 10 years, your built must be between current year minus 6 and current year minus 10. Well, I put 2001 as my year built, which is probably correct because that came from the tax records, but it has to match age. So I put 11 to 20. and that will work. The other one I have here, which I think I can click up here, or maybe it's farther down. There we go. Please validate number of acres according to the land size keyword. So what that means is, in land size, I have that it's standard lot. So Paragon is judging my number of acres based off of this. Well, the number of acres came from the tax records more than likely. So what you have to do is make sure they match. And I'm not a mathematician, but Google is. If I do 0.23 acres to square feet, which you can see I have done before, it will tell me that that is 10,018 square feet, which means it's not standard lot because that only goes up to 9,999. It means it's a 10,000 to 0.49. And so you either just have to remember that 0.22 is standard lot and 0.23 is not, or do the math and then put it in there. Paragon has things built in on the back end like that to make sure the information is correct. And then once all those errors are corrected, then you go up to save listing again. It will save it, submit it, give you the MLS number, and it's live for everybody. Does that make sense? Questions about that? All right. So let's talk about maintaining listings here. So once your listing's in Paragon, if you go up to the listings menu and go to maintain listings, all the listings you have the ability to maintain are going to be here. Up at the top, it's got this little search drop downs that can help you find the property. The thing to remember is it always defaults to active because you maintain active listings a lot. Typically, you're going to maintain a pending listing once. So it always defaults to active. The phone call that we get is someone will call and say, I'm going to mark my listing as sold and I can't find it. It's because it's not active, it's pending. So you want to make sure you either put it to all or pending. I mean, if you don't have a lot of listings, putting it on all is not a big deal. I can see all the listings in the MLS, so I don't put it on all for me because that's a lot of listings. But then once you have the list of properties here you can work with, when you click on the MLS number over on the left, that's going to bring up the whole listing for you to maintain it. And one of the things about maintaining the whole listing is if you want to have the status say price change, when you change the price, you have to maintain the whole listing. You can change the price, but it won't change the status. And the reason they're not connected is if the price was entered wrong and you're fixing it, do you want it to stay active or do you want it to say price change? Especially if you had to raise the price. You know, maybe you entered it wrong and you missed a zero, but now you're fixing it. I mean, you don't want it to say price change because it may be a $4 million home and before it said 400,000. I mean, that's going to be, you don't want to alert people about that change. So if you wanted to make the status say price change, you come here and click on the little magnifying glass. And because it's a listing, there's other statuses here. Price change is here, canceled is here. So you just make sure you pick the appropriate one. And I know I just passed by it, 0 sold price. That's not a real status. It's an old status. But because I work at the MLS, I see all the statuses. When you change your status to price change, just like new and back on market, after 3 days, it changes to active. So it automatically changes back. So clicking on the MLS number lets you maintain the whole listing. Clicking on the price lets you change the price. Again, it won't change the status, but it lets you change the price. And then over on the right, you've got number of pictures. Picture administration we'll talk about in a few minutes. And then select an action. So select an action. If you look on page 4, you'll see the same screenshot here. So select an action are all the maintaining choices that you can do. And if you've looked at select an action previously and you didn't maintain listings, you'll notice it has more because now you can maintain them. Maintain listing, just like clicking on the MLS number, brings up the whole listing to maintain. Price change brings up the price to change it. Expiration date brings up the expiration date. As long as it hasn't expired, you can extend it. Remarks brings up the public and the agent remarks. And if you click on the check mark here, it brings up spell check. So here we can see there's no spelling issues in the agent remarks. Virtual tour are the virtual tour fields. Just put in the web addresses there, branded or unbranded. You'll notice this is a YouTube video in the branded virtual tour field because you can't guarantee that YouTube won't have ads. The way to do that, if you wanted to use a YouTube video, if you have, you don't even have to have one already. If you create a blogger or a WordPress blog account, you know, 123 Main Street or a post for that listing, you can embed the video in there, and then you can choose to not have it have related videos or advertising. But straight from YouTube, you can't do that. So that's virtual tour. Change geocode brings up the same mapping that we looked at before. There's the geocode showing where the property is. Copy clone listing. So let's say my listing expired and my sellers want to relist it a week later, a month later, whatever, and I'm at the same office where I had it before. I click on copy clone listing, makes a copy of my listing, and I'm not going to go super slow here, but if I open all these up, you'll notice the status is not here, and you'll notice all the required fields are filled in until I get down to the dates. So copy clone, very easy to recreate a listing. Now the reason it's called copy clone is obviously we just talked about the copy feature. I can copy my old listing. But the clone feature comes in, let's say I'm entering building lots in a subdivision. I've got 15 lots in the same subdivision with the same seller with very similar legal descriptions. So I enter one as an active listing, and then I clone it, what did I say, 10? 9 other times. Then I've got 10 listings. And then when I clone a listing, it won't let you save it with the same address. So I change the address, change the legal, maybe change the price if it's different, but I don't have to re-enter everything. So that's why it's called copy clone. It does both those things. Open house and tour, you don't need to worry about that. We'll talk about open houses in a minute. Associate documents. This lets you go in and upload documents to the listing. Now, the first thing you have to have is there's 2 ways to do it. You can have the document on your computer, or you can create a cover sheet and fax it in. On your computer is easier and faster because you just scan it and save it or whatever, or have someone send it to you. But if it's on your computer, you just click on Add New, and then you click on Browse to find the document you're going to use. So let's say that's what I'm going to use right there. Let's say this is the property disclosure. So where it says description, you call it what it is, and I'm going to put test because I don't want to mess up their listing. And then if you mark it as emailable or public, emailable, however you would say that, that means when someone emails this listing, this particular document will be public. And it's a per document setting. So you could have 1 public document and 8 agent-only documents. It's up to you. Then I hit save. It uploads the documents. And then once it's uploaded, the document icon will be on my listing. And then when someone clicks on it, they would view this document. To remove the document, you just select it, hit delete, takes it off your listing. If you need to create the cover sheet, you go here to fax cover page, put in the number of pages it's going to be, if it's going to be available for email, what the name of it is, and then click preview, and it creates this cover sheet. You print this out, send it to the toll-free number there at the top, and then it uses this QR code to identify the listing that it goes to. And it says it takes 24 business hours. Usually it's faster than that. But this would be if you don't have a way to scan it yourself and you want to fax it in. You're faxing it to a computer, though. You're not faxing it to us, just to that toll-free number. So that is the associate documents. Next is picture administration. So let's find a listing that doesn't have as many pictures. Let's do this one. All right, here's picture administration. So first thing with picture administration is you want to make sure your pictures are the right size. If you look on the bottom of page 8, you'll see a screenshot there. This is input maintenance tip. To get that same pop-up in Paragon, you go here to upload help up at the top. And what it's telling you is the size your photos need to be. So it says if a photo is over 125 kilobytes in size, the image will be compressed to 125 kilobytes. So I am not a mathematician. I'm not good at math. I'm not going to lie to you about that. So I'm going to put 5,000 in my little calculator here, minus 125 equals 4875, which I actually could have done that in my head, but I just wanted to make sure. Anyway, so if you have a new phone, when I say new, we're talking 3 years or newer, and you take a picture of a property, 5 megabytes could be about the size of your image, or 3 megabytes or whatever. But either way, that's 3,000 or 5,000 kilobytes. So if I've got a 5,000 kilobyte image and I upload it into Paragon, which it will take because they don't want you to exceed 10 megabytes. But if I upload a 5 megabyte file, 4,875 kilobytes are being ripped out of that to compress it. That does not leave a lot of detail to be used in the image, which is why sometimes when you click on pictures, they're pixelated, they're fuzzy, they don't look very good. So you want to make sure that you compress it before you upload it into Paragon, meaning resize it. The dimensions they want are 1280 by 960. With my phone, when I take a picture of it, and my phone's almost a year old, and I know older phones do this too. Like my older phone before this was a Galaxy S3 by Samsung. My default image size was like 3000 by 4000 dimension. They want 1280 by 960. So there's ways to compress it when you take the picture or in a photo program. You just want to make sure it's the right size. Because people call all the time, complain about how their pictures look in Paragon, but they started too big. So if you've got a photographer taking photos for you or someone who works with you to resize the images, have them resize the size and dimensions Paragon wants. If you're doing it yourself and you don't have a way to do it on your computer, there's a link you can click on here and you can download a resizing tool so you can resize your photos. And the way it works by default is it just makes a copy of them. It doesn't do anything to the originals. So you can download an image resizer if you need to. Once your photos are the right size, then to upload a photo, you can just click on the little upload this image button up here on the right to upload one image. So I click on it, go to add files, find the pictures I want to use, house, select it, hit open, and then start upload. Then it uploads the picture. If you want to do more than one, then here's this upload multiple photos. Click on upload multiple photos, click on add files, and then you just select more than one picture. By holding control on your keyboard, you can do them at the same time, or you can just select them and add more. And then when I hit start upload, it's going to upload those images. And once they've been uploaded, then you can rotate them and move them around. Oh, crap. What did I just do?
You got twisted look really good.
What listing was that? No, it wasn't Crosshope. I clicked on another one. That's all right. I'll find it. There it is, Dallin Smith right there. So to remove a picture, click on it, delete it. Let's get rid of that right there. All right. Now, obviously, I can move those over, put them where they go. There we go. All right, so you move the photos, put them where you need them to be. If you want to get rid of a photo, you already saw me do that. If you click on the little pencil here, that lets you edit the photos. So if you need to rotate them or crop them, you can do that. I can rotate it, or I can click on the little corner icon to crop it. So you can do whatever you need to do. And then, of course, you can get rid of your photos. As far as photo requirements, the only kind of listings that require photos, and I'm going to get rid of the rest of these here, are existing residential structures. To be built, under construction, don't require photos. The time frame for putting in a photo is the second business day for those existing residential structures. And with your photos, you don't want to have any signs in your pictures because those photos go to other agent websites, go to consumer websites, and if someone brought up a listing on your website, you would want them seeing the photo of the listing agent with their sign in it. You want it just to be the property. So no signs in your photos. If you have a sign in your photo, they'll email you and ask you to replace it. So just fix it and they won't fine you for that. Questions about uploading photos? Does that make sense? If you were the listing agent or co-agent, you could have already been doing this too. So that's the picture administration. Sold, closed, instead as pending, we'll talk about in a minute. Activity report. So the activity report shows how often this listing has been matched or viewed by people in Paragon or emailed to people from Paragon. But it's showing you data from Paragon. And if you want to know what all these items mean, you can go here to report definitions up on the right. There's a document from Black Knight that explains what the activity report is. But basically, like match saved searches, how many times this listing is matching a saved search. So there's 46 separate saved searches that match that house. 42 contacts that are matched, which means there are saved searches that are not linked to a contact that match that property. Property details viewed, 611. Views from email, 61. Which means when it's been viewed, most of the time it's been viewed in Paragon, not from an email. It's only been viewed from an email 61 times. Favorite possible cart means it's been marked as a favorite or a possible or into a listing cart 10 times. Emails from the system 165 times. So it's been emailed 165 times but only viewed 61, which means when it's been emailed to people, for whatever reason, they didn't click on the MLS number to view it. I'm going to guess probably the price. They clicked on other ones they wanted to see. Total hits. Total hits means how many times it's been viewed in Paragon by an agent or once it's been emailed by a client. Agent hits 232, unique agent hits 232, which means no one has hit it twice in the same day because you're only counted once a day when you do it as an agent hit or a client hit. Client hits 48, unique client hits 44, which means 4 of those hits are duplicates, meaning somebody looked at it 2 days in a row or 10 days later or whatever. They use a cookie to track that. So that's what that's talking about. The reason that's important is if you have a client that wonders why something's not happening with their listing, why they're not getting activity, this can show how often it's being viewed in Paragon. And this doesn't go to other websites and Zillow and Realtor.com, but this is specifically Paragon. So agents in the Treasure Valley and their clients that are being emailed listings. This match saved search is huge because that means only of all the saved searches in Paragon for residential, only 46 of them match this house. And I mean, there's not a way to do a test to see if it would match more, but if you change the price and then came back a week later or a day later, you might see that it matches more. And so it's just a way to help your clients see what's going on. They're going to add more fields over time, but right now that's what they have. So that's the activity report. Showing time lets you set up the showing time settings for this listing. If you haven't set up showing time before, with showing time you can go in and choose when listings are available, how you're going to be notified of showing requests. So here, first thing to notice is with this particular listing, I'm not picking on Greg Bullock. I don't know him from anybody, but you'll notice text message is grayed out. It's because he hasn't verified his mobile number with showing time. So you can only get text messages if they know what your mobile number is. So with showing time, you can choose the type of appointment type showing time is going to use. Appointment required is the default. That means that when someone looks at your listing and they click on schedule a showing, let's find a listing here that has that. When they click on schedule a showing, then they're able to go in and schedule a showing using showing time, and then you're notified via email or whatever it might be. So like, for example, click on schedule a showing, and then as the selling agent, I go in and choose when I want to go. If I don't want them to use that, I can just turn off showing time. Courtesy call or go and show means appointments are automatically approved. So they don't have to go through me to set up an appointment. That's great for a vacant property, but then it lets you keep track of who's visiting it. View instructions only, which means they're going to have to use the instructions. They're not going to use showing time. With showing time, you can come down here and you can add a co-agent or an owner. So if your owner is the person that has to set up the showings, instead of you having to be the middleman and play phone tag with your owner and then phone tag with the selling agent, you could add your owner as a person that is able to approve showings. And if they have the mobile tool, the mobile app on their phone, they can do it with their mobile device. But that allows them, the owner or whoever, to approve showings instead of you having to do it. And then also on showing time, you can add restrictions. So first off, you can choose how much lead time people need to have. Do you want to allow overlapping appointments? But the best part is the showing restrictions. So let's say, for example, this particular seller, Sundays are off limits for them. They got stuff they do, church, family, whatever it is. Sundays are off limits, not an option at all. So I could go here, do an all-day restriction. It's a repeating restriction, and I could just make it for the duration of the listing. And then on Sunday, and I need to give it a name, so we're going to call it No Sundays. And then when I save it, if someone goes to showing time to set up a showing, Sunday will be unavailable on that list. So instead of having to get a phone call and tell 10 people, nope, you can't come on Sunday, nope, you can't come on Sunday, by using showing time, it immediately makes that unavailable. So that's one of the other things showing time can do. So when you're in listing maintenance, that's where you can go in and set up how showing time is going to work.
Did you say the seller, if you're leaving off the seller's an app, they have to go?
They don't have to do an app. They can do it by text message. If they do it by the app, they get more information. But yeah, they don't have to. And You can still be notified, but you just don't have to approve or decline it. The seller can do that. So, super lockbox lets you go in and assign your lockbox. So you click on assign, enter the serial number and shackle code and assign it. If you don't have those numbers, click log on to SuperWeb, and then you can put in your MLS number on Supra. Supra doesn't have the MLS number. Paragon doesn't have the lockbox data. And then we get to set as pending and sold closed. Set as pending is pretty easy. When you click it, it sets the status to pending, which I will let you see here real quick. Up here under status, it says pending. And then when you put a listing as pending, the only two things you have to put in there are the pending date and the proposed closing date. The proposed closing date always has to be in the future. So let's say we put the 29th of November as the closing date, and then something happens and it changes. You need to make sure you make that change in Paragon. If the proposed closing date becomes a date in the past, they'll send you an email to correct it. If you don't correct it, they'll fine you. Because the board got tired of seeing listings just sitting pending forever. Pending listings don't expire. There were listings that had been pending for 4 years. The agent was gone. The office was gone. Nobody knew what happened. So the board made a rule to make that be applicable. So you just want to make sure that if your closing date changes, you reflect that in Paragon. And if it falls through, turn the listing to back on market so it's active again. When you go in and put in your pending information, and if you look on the bottom of page 5, you'll see a screenshot of the same thing that's going to come up here. When you put your listing as pending or sold, what comes up is this hot sheet records pop up. Now, hot sheet search isn't used very often. Hot sheet comments probably aren't read that often. You don't need to put them in there. But you need to read what this pop-up says, because if you don't read this and just hit cancel, all your changes have not been saved. So what it says is, enter any hot sheet comments you would like to appear on the hot sheet report. Click save to continue saving the listing with or without hot sheet comments. Click cancel to abort the operation. Listing data modifications will not be saved. So if you don't put a comment in there, that's fine, but you still need to make sure you hit save. And the way I can tell that people have ignored this and just hit cancel is they'll call and say, well, my listing closed yesterday. I'm going into market as sold, but it still says active, and I know I marked it as pending. And they probably did, but this popped up. They didn't read it. They hit cancel, and it didn't save their changes. So you just need to make sure, first, if Paragon pops up something, you should probably read it. But if this one comes up, make sure you hit save if you want to save what you've done. Now, I don't want to save this, so I'm going to hit cancel. But that comes up when you mark it as pending or you mark it as sold. The other thing to talk about is sold closed. When you go to sold closed, it's going to automatically change the status to sold, just like the other one changed it to pending. And then you come down here and enter the sold information. How sold? Was it IHA, conventional, FHA, whatever it might be. Select the appropriate thing. Pending date and closing date would already be in there. So if it closed a day earlier or whatever, you could update it here if you hadn't already updated it. Real property contributions. Looking for additional objects contributed by the seller, typically in new construction, that are affixed to the property, such as a fence, landscaping, or sprinklers. This is used for appraisals. So if this listing closed at a price that was different than the other homes, maybe because it was the model home or something, maybe there were other things included like full sod to entice someone to buy it. So you would come here and type in whatever it might be. So that way when an appraisal is done and they use it as a comp, they understand why this might be priced differently because it had other things included. Closing cost contribution. It's a dollar amount paid by the seller on behalf of the buyer. Same thing. It's there for the appraisal. So if there's none, put 0. Then, of course, you enter your sold price. You have to enter the sold price. There's not a way to not include that. And then selling agent, selling office, just start typing in the name of the selling agent in there, and it will start coming up for you. If they're not a member of Intermountain MLS, if you start typing in non-member, there's non-member agent, non-member office. So if you had a property that you listed up in Cascade and someone from Mountain Central sold it, and they're not a member of Intermountain MLS, you do non-member agent. Or you put whoever the agent really is. And then once you get all that in there, hit save listing. That saves it. The pop-up's going to come up for hot sheet comments. Click save again, and then it's saved. Questions about entering the sold data and saving it? Does that make sense? Last thing with listing maintenance is entering an open house. Down here at the bottom, when you go to maintain your listing, it says open house. You just put in the date your open house is occurring, and then the time. Let's say it's going to be on the 29th, and it's going to be from 11:30 to to 4:30, and then once you save it, then that open house information appears on the listing, and where you would see it is right down here is where it would be displayed. And then once that open house is over, it's automatically pulled off the listing. Now, if you're having 2 open houses on 2 different dates at different times, there's not a way to enter both of those. You enter the first one, and then when it's over, you could go in yourself and manually delete it and then enter the second information. But it's not going to automatically let you put 2 in there. And open houses, besides being shown on listings, are shown on the MLS public webpage. Right here on the link on the front page of Paragraph, it says this week's open houses. When consumers come to intermountainmls.com, they have the ability to search for open houses, and that information is there. So like right here on the MLS, Intermountain MLS public page, says search for an open house. Someone can come here, mouse over the picture to see a large version of it, click on the address to bring up the property open house information, shows when it's occurring, the map, Google Street View if it's available, and so they can see all that information there. And so that's if you enter that open house at the bottom. Questions about entering open houses, maintaining listings, any of the stuff that we've talked about this morning? So for the meantime, while we still have Instinet doing it, entering it via Instinet is going to be the quickest way to do it. Form Simplicity in the future sometime will have that same ability. I don't know when that's going to be. As it gets closer, I'm sure we'll put that information out there. Just to reiterate, if you haven't filled this out, have your broker sign it, return it to the MLS. Once this gets turned in, then we can update your security level. So I think everybody that came in from the MLS side. If you didn't, the sign-in sheet is still there, so make sure you get signed in, and then that'll be used to verify you came to class, and you'll be good to go. So thanks for coming. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.